Hey everyone, welcome back to Wedding Pro Weekly. I'm Jason Groh. I'm here with the Luxoria Wedding Films crew. To my right, I have the lovely Christine Stewart. How are you today, Christine?
Oh, I'm great. How are you?
I am terrific. And to my left, I have the Mr. Dynamite himself, Tom Monaco. How are you today, sir?
Warming up. Just warming up.
Warming up. I hear you. So let's talk a little bit about videography. Now, this is what we do here. So, you know, it's interesting. There are a number of things that are out there. Like, I always get these every once in a while, these questions that tend to be the same whenever I do a consultation with a couple or with a bride. And I was looking around online, and I noticed that there are some publications out there that have suggestions as to what you should ask your videographer. So I thought, you know, why not put something out there from people who work in the industry as to what we think about these questions that kind of go around. And I know that in the consultations that I conduct with couples and brides and whatnot, that they tend to be the same questions over and over again. So I went to the source. I went to thenot.com, and I found a link here, and I'll put this up on our screen for the 10 questions to ask your videographer before you book. So, numero uno, how long have you been filming weddings, and how many do you do per year? Tom, what do you think about that? Is this an important question? Is this something that has relevancy to what we do?
How long have you been shooting weddings? I think so. Sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, why do you think that? What is it about that you think is, you know, that's really important about that question? I think it's one of the most important questions, actually.
Well, oh man, my first wedding, the inexperience. Like, if you're inexperienced, you don't know what to expect. It's a completely different environment. It's kind of like the same reason we ask our shooters when we hire them, how much experience do you have? Because it's a different world. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I mean, I call it organized chaos. I mean, there's a lot that's going on, and you got to be able to stay in the game. You have to be able to anticipate what's coming next. You have to be able to budget your time properly. There's just so much that you need to know. And you're working on a day that is the biggest day in the life of this couple, or one of the biggest days in their lives, and at least up to this point, probably the biggest. So experience is key. It's everything. I mean, Christine, what do you think about that?
Oh, gee, I know so much because I film every day. I don't film. I'm not a videographer. Well, I think the difference, too, is, you know, with, like, music videos and that, a lot of them do music videos.
Right.
You have multiple takes.
Right.
Which on a wedding
That's
day,
how I started.
you do not.
Yeah. On a wedding day, you do not. That's for sure. So, okay. So, yes, experience matters, guys. Experience matters big time. So, all right, let's go to the next one. Are there any other pros in the area that you love to work with? This question, I mean, I think there's some sort of like theory that's out there that and I get this all the time in consultations that I conduct, that you know that there's some battle that's going to happen between the photographer and the videographer, or some battle between, like, you know, that there's some,
it doesn't
like,
have to be that way.
Right, that there's like some horror story that's out there that, you know, honestly, I have never been on a shoot. I mean, I've been on the shoot with photographers that maybe weren't as courteous, but never to the point where I felt like I was gonna, like, you know, do some cage match with with a photographer. I mean,
I have.
You have? You've had that experience
but,
before?
like, overall, how often?
It's
Like,
rare, but
rare.
it
rare.
happens.
Yeah. I mean,
I got the email one time from a photography company making sure we were gonna stay so far away and do all this stuff behind them because they had a problem before, but we never have.
Yeah.
Not that I know of.
I haven't. I mean, I haven't had those kinds of experiences. I mean, usually when when I'm filming, and I always tell, you know, our team that when they're filming too, when they walk in the door, the first thing you do is I just say to the photographer, I introduce myself. I've never worked with them before, and just say, hey, you know what? You just do your thing. I'll work around you, and
Well, you're doing two different mediums, anyways. It's
Right.
not like there's a competition between the two, and there really shouldn't be. I mean,
exactly.
there seems to be camaraderie there.
Right, but that's true. But there, you know, Tom, you do have a point though. There are, you know, but there is also a courtesy factor, I think. And, you know, sometimes photographers, I think, can forget that. Like I said, it's very rare. This does not happen all the time, and you probably can count on one hand, you know, the number of times.
Yeah, it's every now and again, but when it happens, it sucks.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does suck. And unfortunately, I think it sucks more for the couple because, you know, if the photographer doesn't realize what's going on, then the video is going to be blown because the photographer can just take a couple of shots and walk away. The video, you're rolling continuously, and if this person's constantly coming in and out of your shots, or they're not, you know, courteous as to where you are, unfortunately for the couple, I mean, it's what you have, you know. So, you know, working with good people is key. I mean, do you have an experience that you want to share, or anything that just stands out?
There was one last weekend's shoot, actually.
Yeah? Oh, really? Well, this is pretty close.
Yeah,
Do tell.
It just happened. It wasn't anything like it wasn't the worst thing I've ever experienced, but like there was like a reflection. She was shooting against a window, and I was in her reflection, and she kindly asked me to move a couple times. Before I knew it, I was like out in the hallway. Can you please move, sir? Can you please move?
Right.
And then like she kept stopping me. I'm like, before I knew it, I was literally like out in the hallway.
Oh,
so like, you mentioned that you think the couples will be affected by it. They really didn't know at the time.
Right. But I'm talking about afterwards, like in the film.
I mean, if they find out that I'm shooting some weird angle.
Yeah.
Like why was I there? That's exactly why, and you can hear it in the raw footage.
Right.
So.
Exactly. Or even worse, like just flat out disregarding the.
Yeah.
That happened to you not long ago too on their photo tour.
Yes.
Right.
Millennium Park.
And you were like, it looked like miles away, and you weren't far enough. I forgot about that one.
They were just shooting really long, and I couldn't be anywhere within about 100 or 200 feet.
With all their earpieces and
if they would have told me ahead of time that this was what was going on, I could have brought my
and then again,
all my lenses.
Even
to
if they
the
didn't
shoot.
tell you ahead of time, they could have said it nicely.
Yes.
That's true. So
Kindness goes a long way.
You know, another thing too, like I know, like a lot of times, because photography is usually booked before videography in the consultations that I do. Well before.
They usually book them for the engagement photos first.
That's true.
So
that's true. Now, on occasion, I do get, I have people say, well,
yeah.
Are there any photographers that you like to work with? And I have like a set of like 3 or 4 that I do refer over. DJs though, I do get requests on DJs a lot because usually that's the next thing. So I have a set of professionals that I like to work with that I think are terrific, and so I usually will refer over at that point. It is nice. I mean, I'm not going to completely disregard this question. I think there is something to it. It is nice to have a team that works together. I know that like when I'm working with Roberto, or if I'm working with Eric, some of these guys that I work with a lot, it's fun. I mean, it's like not only are you going to do an awesome job for the couple, but these are people that I built relationships with too, that are friends of mine. So it is nice to have that, or people that you see often out there, that are great to work with, and it makes it a fun day. So it's a good question. I don't know if I would completely base a decision on that.
Well, you can't because
the
pricing could be out of their range, or
exactly.
There's so many factors in that.
Exactly. Okay, number 3. How would you describe your style? More documentary, cinematic, or a mix of both? Now, it's hard to say because you have to think, okay, well, does the couple really even know what that means? What's the difference between documentary, cinematic, or both? And I think I think with this question, it's one of those things where it really depends on how the studio defines that, because there's no strict definition for any of these. Now, I define documentary as a real, like, run and gun shoot. Like, it's literally like, they're just going to do their thing, and we're going to shoot that, and nothing is, staged whatsoever. And I think of real, like, cinematic work, like, okay, I want you to kiss the, to kiss the, the two of you to kiss, and I want you to do this. And I once heard, I remember a story that a photographer told me once that, I was shooting with this guy, and he's like, I wish you were on this shoot. He said, I worked with a company, he said, and they literally were making the guy say a line, making the groom say a line, and then get in the limo. And they retook that shot like 5 or 6 times of him saying, I love you, baby. Gets in the limo.
Where do you find the time to do that in a
right.
wedding day?
Well, and why? Because then it's forced. It's not real.
It doesn't look real, right? Exactly. And I think that. So I always look at.
That's for the
some couples are looking.
Some
couples are looking
like
for that.
Movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the one I watched the other day that someone sent me, where they pulled the groom opened the drawer and her shoes were in there, and pulls them out, and then all of a sudden the camera is in the drawer while the shoes are coming out. It was like.
Right. But what people don't understand a lot of times when they're watching that is that that's actually staged.
Yeah.
So
well,
if
who
you
keeps their shoes in a drawer?
Right.
Let's
exactly.
be honest.
But the thing is that is actually that's actually staged though. So if you want something that's extremely cinematic, you're going to go through your wedding with the photographer doing his thing and the videographer doing his thing as well, or her thing, either way. And it's one of those things where it's just, I mean, you're going to be constantly interrupted throughout your day.
And I would think that would add a lot of time on to how long you need them there.
Absolutely.
Because you have to take all the time to set the shot and, do all this crazy stuff.
Yes, exactly. Where I think that, with what we do, we're kind of more in the background, and letting the photographer do their thing and working around them. And that sets up that.
I'd say we were a mixture of both.
Yeah, a mixture of both. I would say, at least for our company.
We are a mixture of both.
I like to compare it to The Notebook versus The Office.
Right. There you go.
I've seen every episode of The Office like 10 times over, so documentary, and I I do a mixture of both for sure.
Yeah, I agree. All right, number 4. What input do you want from us, and what do you prefer to have the final say on? So this is a good question. I mean, how much input do you want to have? I mean, the thing is that, I always go back to the deck example where, I've talked about this before on the show. I'm not going to get into it too much right now, but that, when I hired a guy to build my deck, I didn't know anything about building a deck. So I didn't get too involved in it. I kind of just let him do his thing. And then at the end, I just had some adjustments I wanted him to make, and we went from there. I think it's kind of like that with, with films as well, that, I mean, are you really an editor? Because sometimes I know on the slight occasion where we have people come back and they want to have like all these adjustments made to their film, that more often than not, they come back to me after we make those adjustments and go, nah, just go with the original version. It was actually much better before we started, tinkering around with it. I know, like for us at least, we get a shot list over to them where they can put down, ahead of time those suggestions that they, want to have, and then afterwards make a few minor adjustments to the film.
Well, and there's nothing wrong too. Like I've had a lot of emails recently of, hey, this person was doing this and we do not want that in our film.
Right.
Like do that right away.
Yes, that is so helpful. When you are working with, the companies that are going to do a lot of post-production work, or anything after the wedding, always let them know right ahead of time. If something occurred, just fire off an email. Say, hey, look, you know what? If you guys can take that out, that'd be terrific. And that way, it's one less step that we have to do.
Or I know this happened, put it in.
Drunk Uncle Ron.
Yeah, drunk uncles.
Oh, no, we just had one where the guy took his shirt off and was being inappropriate, and please don't include it.
Yeah, and please don't include it. Yeah,
I would like to see it.
Yeah.
No, this was even more recent. That was a different one.
Yeah, that was a different one.
That guy was awesome.
That
guy was something.
He was happy.
That's for sure.
Zach, do we have a snapshot?
No, I don't want a lawsuit. We'll keep that one out of here. But but it does happen. Right. But I mean, it does happen. I mean, look, it's it's one of those things where, people have a couple drinks and they're going to start, doing things you don't want to have in your film. Just let the vendor know ahead of time, hey, you know what? I really don't want that, in there. Can you keep it out? And it is helpful from the back end of things. All right. How does your pricing work? So, I think
very well.
very
well. No.
So, here's the deal with this. I think that this question's in this list because a lot of companies don't post their prices. And I think that's the reason why. So I know we post ours, and we have ours up there, and and a lot of companies don't for whatever reason, and I'm sure they have their own reasons for doing it. So in that situation, if you're working with a company that doesn't, post their pricing, then yeah, I mean, you definitely want to get some sort of price sheet for them, find out, how deposits are structured, all of that. I mean, I think ours is pretty straightforward for what we do, but if you have somebody who just, you don't know because they're not posting it, then yeah, you definitely want to break down and have an understanding as to how that works, especially if you have situations where pricing, like a payment, could affect other areas of that of what needs to be done. For example, not getting a payment in, and then all of a sudden you get into a situation where someone doesn't show up for the wedding because you were supposed to pay 2 weeks ahead of time. So it's it is good to know what that is. Moving forward, have you ever worked with my photographer, and do you know him or her? We've kind of already answered this question. We talked about it in, talking about, that question ahead of time when we're talking about photographers. Doesn't matter. Again, I'm just going to briefly say that it really doesn't in the long run. It depends on the photographer themselves. It depends on the videographer themselves. It makes zero difference whether you've worked with somebody or not, in most cases, at least the way that we do it, because we're just working in the background, So any thoughts on that, or we kind of already?
For the most part, that's true. I mean, the only way it's going to affect you negatively is if they're forcing you to shoot out from the hallway. So
that's true. Exactly. So, all right. Have you shot my ceremony or reception venue before? I get this all the time. I get that, and the second one I get is, do you have a video of it? If you have. So a couple things on that. It's not a bad question to ask. I mean,
I don't know.
I certainly don't fault anybody.
I think it's purposeless. I think it's kind of baseless. We film everywhere. That's what you do.
Right.
And
exactly.
I guess you would like to know, but
yeah,
filming ends up being the same unless the church has insane rules.
Yes.
That's a good time to know.
Exactly. I don't.
But other than that,
yeah,
it's kind of a baseless question.
It is kind of a baseless question. I agree with that to an extent. However, there are venues that, and I don't know if this is something that even a bride and groom would know, but there are venues that are very challenging to shoot in. A great example is a venue called the Ivy Room. And the Ivy room, if you're doing it at night, is extremely dark, like really, really dark. And so the videographer really needs to understand how to work in low light, like really understand how to work in it. Otherwise, you're just going to get shadows of everything. And at the same time, you don't want to have a situation where, some light's being blasted at the bride and groom. And one time when I shot there, I mean, this photographer had a huge LED setup down the aisle, blasting light at them because that venue is so dark. But that's not something that I think a bride and groom would know. I think that's something that a videographer or photographer would know. I think that question, I don't fault anyone for asking questions, of course, but I think that question to be listed as something to ask, it's kind of like you said, it's sort of here nor there.
It should be a little more in depth of a question, because they're just going to ask about every venue.
Yeah.
And if it's your basic banquet hall or I don't know, it's baseless.
I agree, and to be, let's face it. I mean, Tom, you and I know this. There are like 4 different ways to film a wedding, right? You walk in the door, you take a look at it, and you go, "Okay, here's the setup. This is what we're gonna do," and you can determine that in like 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, you just gotta take a look at the area.
What it
and go,
should say is,
right?
Have you checked with your church or venue to see if there are strict rules according to videography?
Yeah.
It should be a more in-depth
question can really be combined with the how much experience do you have. I mean,
that's true.
With how much experience I've had, I've shot in the strictest of churches.
Right,
so
you can figure it out now.
Exactly.
Absolutely. You know exactly. I know, like one of the big churches that's that we have here, locally, they refer us out because we know how to film in that location. We get referred there all the time because they're extremely strict, and there are literally a couple places that you can shoot from, and that's it. And it's totally like you can't even get the processional from. You have to go elevated to the second level in order to film that. So you really need to understand how to work in a location like that.
See, and that question, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
It should be posed more to your church or venue, not necessarily to your videographer. It does go back to the experience level as well, but that is a good question for your venue or your church.
Yeah, I agree. So, So, again, is this a key question? Not so much, but again, maybe something you'd want to ask your venue or the church. This is also one of my favorites, and I get this all the time. And I do so many consultations that I tend to know exactly where in the consultation this question is going to occur. And that is, will you be shooting any other weddings the weekend of my wedding? And will you be the one shooting on the day of? This is actually a 2-part question. Shooting any other weddings the weekend of my wedding. I think that just depends on if it's a person or a company. I honestly think that this question it's baseless. I mean, obviously, yeah. I mean, if you're going to do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, guess what? We work in weddings. Right. There's a Friday wedding, there's a Saturday wedding, and there's a Sunday wedding. And how that would determine how anyone would want to book someone or not book someone is kind of like, if that's a deal breaker, you're like, well, guess what? We're pretty busy, so we're going to it's, will you be shooting any other weddings the weekend of my wedding? Oh. And also,
silly.
In what they respond to, again, that question to me always, it's mind-boggling. But the way that the knot gets back on is they say, if your videographer has several events to shoot on your wedding day, you'll want to be sure that they have time for your wedding.
Okay, now if you have another
shoot
shooting
on the same day,
right? If you have another shoot on the day, that's
on the day of.
Well,
who would
but
do
the
that?
question, right? But the question is the other weddings on the weekend. Well, if you're a good videography company, guess what? You're going to be busy. Or a videographer, you're going to be busy. You want to work with the guys who shoot all the time,
for sure.
Because shooting means experience. Experience means out there. It means that they want, that they're a wanted, person that someone wants to work with. Those are the guys you want to work with. You don't want to talk to the guy who's been like, I shot a wedding 6 months ago and then one last year. You're hired. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where, it really is baseless. Now, if you're going to be shooting on, if you're going to shoot maybe 2 weddings the day of, I guess, but I don't know who would do that.
I
mean,
you would
never done that.
I've never done that before. So this question, like I said, I get it all the time. It's in here. And I wonder sometimes if they're just reading off of this. But so that's that. Now, will you be the one shooting on the day of? I think that's a pretty good question. I get it all the time, and I think it's a fine question. You're going to want to know who you're working with. I fully agree with that. Now, we're a videography company. We're not a one videographer operation, okay? So, we have a team of shooters who work with us, and we offer up the opportunity to sit down with them, at a coffee house or some, at a location a meet and greet, where we're going to cover everything with you and go through everything with you. And and that, and so that is important. You want to know who you're working with. And if that, and the way that we do it is, let's say, for example, you sit down with someone and for some reason the personalities just aren't matching up, then say something. Let somebody know. I mean, let someone know that that is the case. And, like the way that we do it is we can always make that adjustment because, we can, go ahead and switch it out for you in most cases. Now, if you're doing something really close to the day of, then, it may be a little bit more difficult. But if you meet a little bit further out, that opportunity may be there. So it is a possibility that we could switch it out. But it is important that you like who you're working with. And it's important that you meet them ahead of time. I mean, this person's going to be, at some of the more intimate moments of your life. I mean, you're going to be getting dressed. You're going to be, it's one of those things where you're going to want to know you're going to want to know who's in there. Now, from a filming standpoint, I know, I can't speak for other companies, but the way that we do it, we all film to, the same specific style or the same structure to meet a studio standard. That's what our goal is. So when you work with our team, we're all filming the same way. In the edit is where things kind of tend to come together a little bit more, and the editing side is where things are, is where things start to differentiate a little bit based on what it is that you want to see. So getting to know the person you're working with, absolutely. Having the opportunity to sit down and go through with them, absolutely. And even with that said, there are companies out there who just send people. There are. There's one that has to do with a flavor of ice cream that I'm pretty sure that that just sends whomever in a T-shirt with their name on it. So,
well, you can get the T-shirt taken off.
That's right, but you have to pay extra to do it, right? That's of course that's the case. So, anyway, yes, that's an important one. So, will you be shooting other weddings? Nah, you want to work with people who are busy. Will you be the one shooting on the day of? Yes, that's a good question. Number 9, what does your camera and equipment look like? So, I know why this question's here, but I think nowadays it's maybe a little more irrelevant than it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It's here because...
Well, when they say... I'm sorry, I don't
mean
to interrupt, but when they say
look
like, is it so it's not obtrusive?
Yeah, that's why.
Because
it used to be...
really asking, what you're using. It's is it big?
Well, right. Because there's a shift. There's been an industry shift. And you know about this as well, that back in the day, it used to be big tripods, huge cameras.
Yeah, that one that sat on your shoulder.
Right. Big shoulder mount cameras. They're very intrusive. They truck them all over the the dance floor. Big, car lights.
Spotlight.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I still see shooters do it though.
Do you?
Oh yeah. I'll be at a banquet that's got three separate banquet halls. I'll be doing my thing. I'm walking past and they're in there with their big rigs and
yeah.
I don't see a point for it now, but
yeah, I don't see a point for it either. But it is one of those things where those lights can be it's they can be pretty heavy. It's
but
an instant migraine.
There's probably that assumption as well that if you come with more equipment and fancy equipment that you're better.
I think it depends.
Not necessarily
well, if it's a Steadicam or something, I know you run Steadicam, Tom. I mean, that's something where people, it is appreciated when people see it. They're like, wow, that's awesome. Or a drone of some sort, that's appreciated as well. Those little things add up to, a better film. And, so those things are important. But, what do you think, Tom? What is your opinion on this?
Less is more.
I do think so, too. I think when you're showing up with a lot of stuff.
Less to worry about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's less you got to worry about. I
bring the appropriate lenses and all that stuff.
Right.
But if you're tinkering around with this equipment and that equipment and that equipment, you're bound to miss something.
That's true. But as everyone knows in this industry, people who work in it at least, that the type of camera that you're working with is not as important as the type of lens you are working with. The lens is the bigger deal. I mean, if you got some lousy lens that can't handle low light, then you can throw it on a Mark III or something like that. You're not gonna...
There's got to be a question out there, maybe not on this list, where I get asked, well, what kind of cameras do you use?
Right.
And then I tell them, and they're like, they want to know the brand and the specific model, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you know why? Because they're really scared. Is this really that good of a company?
Yeah.
Are they using the Mark III with the L series lens and the, you know what I mean?
We really shoot with a Polaroid camera.
Right, exactly. I shoot with an iPhone through a kaleidoscope. It's the best. You're gonna love it. It's an amazing effect. Yeah. So
Great.
camera.
Now you're gonna get people asking you to do that.
All right,
can you do that? 'Cause
exactly.
I think that would look really cool.
They do make adapter lenses for iPhones.
They do, and they actually look really good.
Do they really?
They do.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. And look, they're in the film industry. I'm just gonna say it. Sometimes the best camera is the one that you have with you, and they tell you that all the time. I mean, you better believe.
Think so.
Yeah, but you better believe that if there, but if there was a failure, if there was a camera failure or something like that, you better believe I'm going to the iPhone.
For sure.
You better believe it because it's 1080p. It may not be like, I probably still have my light going. You know what I mean? And I can still get a great shot
It's
off
good
of
for
that.
audio too.
Yeah, and actually, they are pretty good for audio.
I know we had someone
as
that
well.
had to use it for one reason or another. I don't
Yeah,
remember. And then the groomsman thought he lost his phone, and they're all discussing like, whose phone is
Well,
this?
that's because they're professional. They're actually professional apps you can get for the iPhone where you can plug in.
Well, he used it as a backup.
Right, that's true.
It wasn't his primary source.
No, it's not usually used as a primary source. But a professional will do what he did.
Right.
They'll have that on all those professional apps loaded in, and then pop their mic into it, and they're good to go. And so, it is. It is one of those things where hey, you're going to go to it if you absolutely.
If my
have to.
stationery went out for whatever reason, I would have to take my iPhone on there so fast.
Yeah, it's a great, it's a great camera on that phone. It really is. But it's not a primary camera, of course. It's not what you're going to be using most of the time. But in an emergency situation, yeah, you bet it's a go-to. All right. Will there be a second shooter, a stationary camera? What a lead-in!
I like that.
Or any other?
Did you
know
Did
that
you plan it?
I had no idea.
Look at that. Yeah. All right. All right. Will there be a stationary shooter? A secondary. Let me try that again. Will there be a second shooter, a stationary camera, or any other backup cameras on hand for our wedding?
Well,
We just covered it, right?
Any
Well,
other
and actually,
backup?
not
Right.
only did we just cover it
Channeling
though,
my inner
but
Chris Farley.
Right.
that's listed in our packages online.
Yeah.
Like
It is.
it states it on there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, second shooter stationary.
But some, even if they do like the one videographer shoot, sometimes our videographers will bring an assistant on their own.
Yeah, that is true.
You do
Yeah,
run that
sometimes they
chance,
do.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. On occasion, that can be the case. Now, with this, I think the knot's right. The knot says, without a second shooter or any other backup, it may be difficult or nearly impossible for your videographer to capture every moment on camera. Many times, a second shooter comes with a videography package, but just in case, it's good to ask. I think that's important. I don't know how you shoot anything with just one camera. Especially, unless you're going to heavily edit it. But even then, you need to have some sort of stationary going on to really have a good shoot, especially just capturing reaction shots. Yeah, that kind of thing. You're looking at me with a big smile.
Well, we
on
do
you.
have a package that's a one camera package.
We do, but it's the limited package.
Yes.
So with the limited packages, you're just, you're flat out just getting, raw footage only. So, in my consultations, I tell people, look, it's not going to be as dynamic. You're going to, we can't really get the reaction shots. It's, it is a basic introduction. Like, I just want something filmed. I don't have a lot of money. I just want this thing shot package. And in that case, then, yeah, here you go. This is what we can do. But usually, for us,
Sorry, I just wanted you to explain.
yeah, that's
it.
fine. I know.
But
Little disclaimer, right?
With these moments that are missing, if
Right.
you only have one are they talking about like groom prep versus bridal prep and missing groom prep?
No, I think they're just talking about, although you know what, you do bring up a good point. When do you want to have a secondary
See,
man
these
camera
questions
there?
are so vague.
I know, right? That is true. They
It's
are vague.
so vague.
But yeah, if you're going to have split bride and groom preparations, you have
Look,
to have.
obviously, having two videographers is the way to go.
Well, of course.
But you're paying more in labor.
You are.
Not everyone can do that.
Not everyone can do it. Exactly. And it's going to cost a lot more to the, to the consumer.
Absolutely.
In the end, the bride and groom. So not everyone's going to be able to afford that, but I think that you definitely need to have some sort of package if you're going to have an edited film or something of a higher quality that has a stationary camera in it.
Yeah,
at least.
stationary camera is
Yeah,
very
that's
important.
it's key. But you're right. When would you actually want to have a second shooter? I get this one all the time too. Split bride and groom preparations. What I mean by that is you're getting ready at two separate locations altogether. So what that means is that we can't be at two places at once, obviously, as much as I'm sure so many people would love me to be, you can't. So it's one of those things where, you definitely need to have, a 2-man camera shoot. I always say, like, if you're going to have your photo tour bump up to your cocktail hour and it's going to be occurring at the same time, then have that photo tour covered by one and have the cocktail hour covered by another. That way you can see what you're missing. I think that's a good reason too. Of course, additional shots. What do you think?
When I'm shooting by myself, I always ask what they'd prefer.
Yeah.
Because their photographer is going to be shooting their photos on the photo tour.
Right.
So I just ask if I'm by myself, would you rather me shoot alongside the photographer on the photo tour? Or would you rather me head over to cocktail hour?
Right. I agree. I do
That
the
easy.
same thing. Yep. You're absolutely right. on
What
that.
makes a better film? Going on a photo tour?
Photo tour?
I prefer the photo
Yeah,
tour.
photo tour is always
That's
better.
good to know.
Yeah. Photo tour and prep, guys. Photo tour and prep.
Yeah.
You don't want to
The
film.
films do not.
The
look
films
as
do
good
not
without
look
prep.
as good
Prep
without
is necessary. You could
Yeah.
skip on all the dancing.
the open dancing. Exactly. I mean, you want to start that.
That's where most of the problems come up, anyways. Like so and so was doing this, and
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you're not gonna
And
have that with your
you're not
prep.
gonna. Yeah. I mean, prep. I mean, you don't want to.
it's the best opener.
It's the
for
best
the
opener
film.
to the film. You're absolutely right. I mean, it really is. Otherwise, with a ceremony only, you're starting with detail shots and you're going right into it, and it's not as dynamic of a film. I tell people that all the time. They're like, well, I don't know if I want prep film. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's not as dynamic.
Another thing I want to bring up
Yeah.
with preparations, if they're getting ready in like the same hotel, then it's definitely not necessary to have 2 shooters.
Right.
That's true. Yeah. That's where. Yeah. So if you're doing it like where a groom's getting ready down the hall on another floor or whatnot, yeah, I mean, you have more than enough time, because what's going to happen is when you're, changing into your dress, we're just going to head out and head on over to where he's at, get a little bit with him, and then come back. And then when you're ready, we'll wrap up with everyone seeing you for the first time. So that, in that case, I think it works pretty
Yeah,
well.
so prep
but
and photo tour.
yeah, prep and photo tour. Prep and photo tour.
If you want that dynamic film.
Yeah, something
yes.
really, because I mean, let's face it, the live elements, the ceremony, the reception doesn't take a genius to film it. Speeches and toasts, it's pointing a camera
Well,
at
and you're
someone
gonna
speaking.
have all that in your raw footage.
Yes,
And
that's
in
true.
your own film, you're not gonna want to watch, 2 minutes of some woman dancing.
Exactly, right.
I know, because we recently got that request.
We did get that request. Can you please take her out of
Please
the film.
don't put her in my film.
Please don't put her in my film. So it is, it's one of those things where, I mean, it is. I mean, the reception, it doesn't take a genius to point a camera at somebody speaking and just keep it there. I mean, it isn't. So the real dynamic aspects of your film are going to be in the in-betweens. That really shows you how good a company is, how they're able to film those moments, because that's where the creative stuff really happens.
Sure.
It's how you are filming that, and that really takes that video and puts it over the top and makes it professional.
I mean, even
So,
if you don't have them getting your makeup, I love the dress shots.
well, the dress shots
Panning
are great.
across, panning up, it's beautiful.
Exactly. And for some of our guys that use steady cams, it looks
Sliders.
amazing. Sliders. I mean, that stuff looks good. We're working drones into some of this stuff too. And, I mean, some of this stuff all that stuff looks terrific. I know we had, I think a guy who was on like the coast of the water, and he flew the drone out. It looked absolutely amazing. I was like,
Hey, Tom did amazing work with a weed.
He did.
It was the flowered weed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I like that one.
beautiful.
Texas.
I love that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. I mean, so, I mean, those moments are key. And those are big moments that you want to have. So very important. So those are the 10 questions that the Knot has. Anybody have anything they want to add? Anything that you can think of that is pretty important that, maybe they're leaving off the list here?
What is the knot? No, I have no idea.
I'm trying to think. What do you think? Anything that Christine, anything that you can think of that's...
I'm trying to think of what people ask me. There's a lot of concern with like main films.
Yeah.
Like, do I need the long one?
That's a good question. Let's talk about that a little bit. So the main film, here's my opinion on getting a longer film, right? So brief history of videography.
I think you'll get bored.
Yeah, well, brief history, I'll give you the 30-second story of videography. Time it. If I can do anything in 30 seconds.
Not
But
talking.
it used to be that you had these long films like 10 years ago, and that's what they had, a long film. You didn't even have film trailers. Film trailers actually started, we've been around for 10 years. They started around the time when we were getting started. So film trailers really only came out about 10 years ago, where you had something short. As videos became easier to share online, film trailers became more and more popular because people wanted to share those. And so what happened is that people were a little bit more apt or interested in watching shorter films. The reason why you see now 15-minute films is because there was a shift in the industry. Everything moved from these big cameras that can film, an hour at a time on tape, sometimes 2 hours at a time on, actual tape, to DSLR, which is all digital. And DSLR cameras, for the most part, can shoot, 15, 20, 25 minutes at a time. So people got into the industry. The entry to barrier came down, but
Are
a
you
lot of
timing
people,
What?
She's
I said,
asking
are
me
you
to
timing
this? But the fact of the matter is that a lot of people, it became easier to get into the industry because the cost factor wasn't as high. So a lot of people didn't want to have to deal with a lot of audio. They didn't have to deal with a lot of this stuff. So a lot of amateurs started creating short 15-minute videos with these DSLR cameras that actually looked pretty good. The problem is they get into the wedding business and they realize that a lot of this has more of working with the couple and not as much about working with, the video, and they would get burned out and they would leave. So a lot of these companies would essentially come and go. But that's where you started to see a lot of these short 15-minute films. So couples got a little bit more interested in that. Again, you could share even a 15-minute film with people, and a 3 to 5 minute, where a longer 30, 60, 90-minute film, people are going to start really checking out. So, but I do get that question a lot. when do you want to, when is it that you should have a longer film? Should you do it like on a one-man, one stationary? Should you do it on a two-man camera package? And my answer to that is always the same. It's in the two-man camera. Two-man cameras are up. You're going to want to have that longer film. Sorry, Christine, go ahead.
I was just going to say, even in those, though, like, it's still kind of overkill. You're getting all your raw footage. You're getting the 3 to 5. You're getting the 10 to 15. It's got all the primary points in it.
Right. You're gonna.
The
At least
main
with us, you're gonna hear your
film would
toast
be
and all
great
your. Yeah.
if you have a 3-day wedding.
Right.
Or a 2-day wedding.
Right.
Or entire
Like a longer
day
South
wedding.
Asian
Yes.
wedding. Yeah, exactly.
Then I could totally see it because they have a lot more.
Yeah, there's a lot more
stuff
going on.
going on.
Yeah, exactly. And usually on those you have multiple man cameras as well because there's so much to cover.
But that's why we always tell them, get all your footage from us first, get all your films,
Right.
and then we'll add it on after if you still want it.
If you feel like you still need it, yeah, it's always better to do that. I mean, they want to pay that money up front, that's fine. But at least for me, I feel better saying, hey, like, why don't you look at everything first, and then at that point,
I check out on the 10 to 15 minute films.
Yeah,
that's me. I kind of have like.
Yeah, but I mean, but it is,
way.
and I always think with multiple man cameras, those are better films. Tom, you do a lot of editing. What do you think about that?
For a main film
versus like a 15-minute, like when you actually would want to have like a longer, like
if
30, 60, 90.
If I wanted a long form film, then I'd probably want more shooters.
Yeah. Because you're just cutting to the stationary camera.
Right.
That's the only thing. Your only other camera to cut through is the stationary camera. In those trailers, we're not really using it too much. It's sprinkled in if needed. In these longer films, you're cutting to it. And so you're just sitting on like a stationary shot for a long period of time while the videographer is readjusting to the next position that they need or potentially next angle that they need. So it's not as dynamic of a film.
But with that said, I wouldn't prefer to have a long form anyways.
No.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I wouldn't either. I think that, just that 10 to 15.
It's kind of overkill.
Mm-hmm.
It is, yeah. So longer films, I mean, they're still around. You can order them. I mean, they're not as maybe in as they once were, years ago. But at the same time, I mean, I do think that, with that, you probably want to go with like a multiple man camera package. It's going to be a better film. We're going to be relying upon the man cameras, which are much more dynamic, and cutting in that stationary every so often, as opposed to just sitting on some stationary camera for a long period of time. So that's a good question. Anything else you guys can think of? No,
not for this.
Not for this. Okay.
For other things.
For maybe other things down the road.
Next
okay.
show.
Next show. Okay, great. Anything, Tom? Any questions that you can think of that bride and groom should know about our side of the business?
Well, you kind of touched on it though with the Bland company.
Yeah.
What are
the
you
Bland company.
What are you gonna wear?
That's true. What do they show up in? I mean,
I would want to know
videographers.
that. For me, that would be a big question for me.
How do they dress?
Because I know Tom dresses pretty snazzy.
I used to dress black on black, but I dress a little snazzier now.
Yeah.
Your vest.
Yeah.
Looks good.
I think at least something
No
that's
t-shirts.
business casual and up.
Casual, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, t-shirt companies, I don't know why they do it. I don't know what the point of that is. I mean, it's branding, but it looks gaudy. I don't get it.
Yeah, on a supposed to be a semi-elegant day.
Right.
And
I know. You're here with your logo plastered over the
t-shirt.
T-shirt, and you want us to take it off? Sure, pay us more money to do it. I mean, that's just. At least, I'm assuming they still do this, of course. I don't know if they still do. As far as I know, yeah.
Everything I've seen, they do.
Yeah, you hear it.
Photographers hate that too.
Definitely.
We have that stationary camera. We're going to be showing up in that shot.
Mm-hmm.
We're wearing t-shirts.
Right, that's true. That's a good point too.
That's when wearing black on black.
So Zach, for those of you who can't hear, Zach is our guru back there mixing the show, but he had chimed in with the point saying that occasionally in a stationary camera you may actually see your videographer, and if that's the case, you don't want to see someone walking around like in a T-shirt or jeans
bright colors at all.
Bright colors, right? Exactly, things like that. So yeah, that's
and it's not like a small logo. It's
right. It is.
You can't miss it.
No, you can't miss it. It's crazy. Anything else you guys can think of?
Yeah, we should get big patches. Put on our backs.
On the back with a leather jacket, some biker gear.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Maybe not. So.
Where are you going?
Right. All right. So anyway, so this hopefully this has been helpful. This is what the Knots got out there. There are other publications too with other questions. There's one that I saw that was like 27 questions. I'm like, we're not going to go that far.
How can you even ask 27
I don't know.
questions?
I don't know how you can.
I mean, basically, we show up, we know the drill, we're
Right.
going to film, and
exactly.
End of the
that's
day,
pretty much about it.
We're
I know.
good to go as long as our pricing meets
Right.
up with your budget.
Right.
And you like what you see online.
Yeah, that's what that's what you're gonna expect. So it's good. Well, I appreciate your time and I appreciate you listening and watching this. Hopefully this has been insightful for myself, Christine, and Tom. We will see you next time.